At this time, I'll call the Budget and Purchasing Committee meeting to order. Ask Pat to call the roll, please.
Kirby. Lewis. Here. Mitchell.
Here.
Moon. Here. Samples. Here. You have a quorum.
Thank you. I'll now ask for the emergency announcement to be given.
Before we get started, let me read the emergency evacuation procedures. In the event of an emergency evacuation, an alarm will sound. Everyone should exit the building by way of the nearest stairwell in a safe and effective manner. If the nearest stairwell is blocked by smoke, use the other stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Once you have reached the main floor, follow the exit signs to exit the building and quickly proceed away from the building. Please be mindful of others evacuating and of emergency vehicles.
Now I'll ask if there's any public input of items on the agenda. Any public input items on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to purchasing. D1, this is a review of sole source purchases for information. D2, these is perishables. This is information only. D3, review the awarded bids. This is for information. Y'all have a copy of the minutes. They need approval. The minutes are in your package. You had a chance to see them. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman. Move to approve.
Do I have any discussion? I'll ask for a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Declare the motion passed. Finance increases and transfers. Next, we have the finance portion of the agenda. If approved, these items will go on to the Commission for approval. F1 increases. F1A, Highway Fund 131, $296,000 in capital outlay.
We move it on, Mr. Chairman.
Have a motion. Do I have a second? Any discussion? I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Kirby. Yes. Lewis. Yes. Mitchell.
Yes.
Moon.
Yes.
Samples. Yes. Motion passed.
Item F1B, Schools, Fund 141. Mike Treadway, would you like to come up and explain this one?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a request by the Board of Education, as was passed at its last board meeting, to increase the sales tax revenues by $314,000. The purpose of the $314,000 was to keep the 42 teaching assistants positions that were set to be layoffs that was put into our budget as an amendment to the budget and was passed.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Do I have a motion? Having no motion, it fails for lack of a motion. F1C, Circuit Court Fund 101. Randy?
Yes, this item was brought to this body in February, and at the end of the fiscal year, June, the project was not complete. Therefore, we're asking that you reappropriate the amount of money that is yet to be spent on the project. This is all setting in a reserve for specifically the county court clerk or circuit court clerk to be used on computer or technology projects only. You approved initially $70,028.26. The $43,000 is what is yet to be spent on the project. So this is merely to reappropriate it to be spent so the project can be finished this year. No.
Move its recommendation to the full commission.
Have a motion. Do I have a second? Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I ask for a roll call vote. Pat?
Kirby. Lewis. Mitchell.
Yes.
Moon,
Yes.
Samples. Motion passed.
Okay, there's been an item there that's been added, F1D. It's the Sheriff Fund 101. Randy, do you want to explain that?
This is a interlocal agreement between Blount County Sheriff's Department and the city of Friendsville, where the sheriff is providing one law enforcement officer to basically work within the city limits of Friendsville. And this interlocal agreement allows for Friendsville to pay Blount County for the cost of that officer. And it's to the tune of $53,000 and change. So we're bringing it to you in the form of a budget amendment so that we can recognize the revenue once it comes in. They'll be paying by month, and it's $4,400 and change per month.
Move we send it on, Mr. Mayor.
Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Randy, is that the full cost?
That is my understanding. I mean, I've talked to both the lawyer who prepared it and the sheriff's department. I talked to Chief French.
That's a full-time officer.
That's my understanding, yes.
Is that the addition of a full-time officer?
I don't know that we're hiring anybody to do this. All I know is it was one of the requirements that Friendsville had is they wanted somebody stationed full-time within the city limits.
Okay.
I don't know how the sheriff's department's going to deploy that person.
But that would include benefits, including
Yes.
the 401K match and so forth?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Pat, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Kirby. Lewis. Mitchell.
Yes.
Moon,
Yes.
Samples. Motion passed.
Move on to item G, discussion of possible action. USI Consulting Group, post-retirement welfare benefit valuations. Randy, you want to discuss that?
This is a report that quantifies the city's liability exposure for post-retirement benefits, and this was presented to us a couple weeks ago, and I asked that USI Consulting come and actually present this to this body so that we can flow it on through to the full commission. I think this is information that not only this body but the full commission needs to be aware of. There's a great deal of discussion that's been made in recent months about the liability exposure that we have as an employer for retiree insurance, and this speaks specifically to it. This body funds this work to be done every year or every other year, and I think you deserve the right to have the authors of it come and have a conversation with you about it. So, gentlemen.
Looking at the schedule where it's broken down, 101, 115, library, 128, 131, 141, 142, et cetera. 128 was my question. If you go to the chart of accounts,
That's
it
the
says
drug court.
Drug court, okay, thank you.
This is by Robert Webb from USI that has prepared this report, and I'll turn it over to you to make some brief comments about what they have before them.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Vineyard. And my name is Matt Cross. This is my father, Bob Cross, with USI Consulting Group out of Knoxville. And Mr. Vineyard did a good job of sort of explaining what this is, but just to briefly cover what we're talking about. In 2006 and 2007, depending on the size, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board passed Statement Number 45 that requires that governmental entities recognize, value, and disclose other post-employment benefits, commonly shortened as OPEB benefits. OPEB benefits refer to what you might call fringe benefits other than pension benefits, and this typically includes medical, life, and dental insurance for your people that they enjoy in accrue over their career. For the past 4 years, we've prepared the report that you have in front of you that values and then that the auditors consume to disclose the county's liability. Page 13, which is the financial statement disclosure page, is the heart and soul of this report. And just to briefly discuss a few of the numbers, line 7 and 8 under Section A is your net OPEB obligation. If you're familiar with pension plans at all, this is exactly similar to what's called the net pension obligation, but it's essentially a running tally, if you will, of the costs that have been accrued by the county and not funded. Most public employers do what's called a pay-as-you-go schedule, meaning the only cash flow associated with these benefits is when you actually pay them out to retirees. Now, something that you're allowed to do in the state of Tennessee, and I think sort of the key discussion here is pre-fund your liability in what's called an OPEB trust. An OPEB trust has to be registered with the federal or the state funding board in order to create and fund the trust. And it's exactly like a pension plan. You're coming up with cash beforehand to fund a trust designated for the benefit of your employees, other post-employment benefits. There are 3, I guess, categories of advantages to doing this. The first, which is pretty simple, from the employee's perspective, they get peace of mind knowing that there are assets set aside in a trust that's designated explicitly for this purpose. You get an accounting benefit, which is crucial. If you see on this page, we have an interest rate of 4%. That's required. We have to use what's called a current interest rate, and those are obviously very low right now. If you are funding a trust, you use instead the assumed investment return of the trust as your discount rate. And that can depend on I guess, how conservative your assets are, but 7 to 7.5 is pretty typical. That can reduce your liability 15 to 30% almost immediately, and that's because of the way that you're pre-funding those benefits. And then the last is an actual economic benefit, and that's that if you're utilizing a trust approved by the state government, you can invest in mutual funds the same way a pension fund would, whereas otherwise you'd be investing in what's called restricted assets, which won't yield as much as mutual funds potentially. To sort of highlight the importance of having this discussion under Section B, you can see as of this most recent valuation, 7/1/12, your actuarial accrued liability, which is the present value of everything that the county will have to pay for who's employed now, so no assumptions on hiring, is $19.1 million in benefits. The very last page, and you don't need to turn to it, I'll tell you the number, is a running tally of our expected cash flow, and that's not adjusted, that's not present value, that's just what's going to be outflowing. We're talking about $56.7 million in benefits are going to be paid out over the lifetime of all of your current employees. So pretty large number. But the hope is that by creating a trust and investing over time, over the long term, that economic growth that you achieve in your assets helps to reduce that burden on the county government over the long term. To give you a sense of scale, if a trust were to be put into effect for the fiscal year ending 6/30/14, it would be about $322,000 that would need to go into a trust. It would be less than that number, but we don't know exactly because the calculation has to be done, and it depends on a number of factors how drastically you're impacted by that lower discount rate. But that essentially, that number is determined by that annual OPEB cost that's listed as $1.771 million compared to the cash flow that we expect the county to have for 14, which is $1,448,000. The difference is what gets funded into the trust. Logistically speaking, the trust won't actually be making the payments out. Typically what we see, because systems are already set in place to handle the administration of the payments and you have accounts set up for that, you continue with that process because that cash flow counts as a contribution from an accounting standpoint, and it's only the difference that that $322,000 that goes into a trust that remains separate and protected until you get to a funded status that trust can then take over all of your benefits, and then that's what's paid out in perpetuity until the assets dissolve. I'll say, as far as drawbacks or considerations the county needs to keep in mind, obviously you're coming up with more money. You previously just had the cash flow associated with the payments, but now you have about $300,000 a year more outflow. The hope is that with economic gains, you end up spending less over the long term, and that should happen. The only way it wouldn't happen is if your trust actually yielded less than what your restricted assets are otherwise giving you, which is obviously pretty low right now. The other drawback is that once assets go into the trust, it cannot come out for any reason except for to pay these benefits. Obviously, a switch can be flipped and you can decide to stop funding. You're not required to fund after you've started. There isn't any legal requirement to fund these, but every dollar that goes in has to come out for this benefit. So I think that pretty much sums up the pro cons. You obviously may all have questions, and I know it's a tremendous amount of information to get thrown all at once.
Does anyone have any questions for Robert?
How many of your public clients would have a trust fund set up for these benefits?
We have 5 right now.
Out of?
20-ish, yeah, about 20.
So,
one county government and the rest are utilities.
okay, so the pay-as-you-go method is obviously, as you stated, the prevailing method of addressing this liability.
It is, and
So,
Bob Cross, just candidly, I think in many instances the cities or whatever just don't have the money. I'm just being candid. So I think the ones that have the money, and I'm not saying, I'm not trying to whatever, but I think it's a practical situation. It's pay as you go, and they have to come up with, in this case, $300,000 as a challenge. I think a lot of them had the money, they probably would.
so really the reality is we either continue on a pay-as-we-go basis, or if we were looking at an alternative, which would be setting up a trust, there's an initial outlay of $300,000 plus that we would need to have to set the trust up, plus the cost of setting the trust up.
that's correct. That
There'd have to be plan documents, the whole 9 yards for the trust, right?
That's right, but that shouldn't be a very substantial cost because the state provides a template for free that you
Okay.
can work off of. The clients that we work with, we've modified those, especially the IPS, but they're already approved with the state. The only thing we have to change is the name. So
Okay.
it's a very simple process by this point. That $300,000 amount is approximately what it would be each year for the first 10 years before it would start to go down. One of the things that we constantly have our finger on is the pulse of the defined benefit industry in general, because we do work with a number of pension plans. And the pattern we see is that OPEB standards generally trail behind pension standards about 1 or 2 years. The pension side is changing with GASB statements 67 and 68. The methodology is changing, and you're now comparing the liability against the complete funded status of the plan, as opposed to sort of what this is, an ongoing tally of your contribution versus the need. So what we could see, and this is speculation, I'll stress, but what we could see is that switch occurs on the OPEB side, and then you're being compared your funded status against your accrued liability. So right now, your liability that's being disclosed is only $2 million, rising to $2.4 million next year. Under the current pension method, your liability would be almost $20 million. So it's radically different, and it's something on the horizon. That's an important consideration when you're thinking about this, is are you sort of a practicer of best practices, or are you going to act on need only, when you're legislated or required to make the change? The advantage you have if you do decide to create a trust is, until it's changed, you can still decide to stop. And you can partially fund the trust. So that $300,000 would be fully funding the trust appropriately per our valuation. You get the full benefit of using the interest rate of the investments. If you partially fund, you use a blended rate. So it's not an all or nothing. This is still an area where you have a great deal of discretion as an acting body to determine how best to deal with this liability.
If you'll note, I think it's, since this liability has been discussed a number of times, the liability is actually decreased from the last time these gentlemen prepared the report. And since it's decreased about $4.5 million, in lay terms, what would you attribute that to?
That's mostly due to an actuarial gain. Your people are healthier than, or your people behaved in such a way as to benefit the plan, as well as your healthcare costs haven't been increasing as aggressively as what we've seen in the region. If you look at our trend rates for medical trend rates under Section C, we have a 2012 rate of 8% and an ultimate rate of 5%. 5 is what we expect the trend rate to be over the long term, 20 to 30 years. But obviously recently we've seen tremendous volatility, and so each time we've restated valuations, we've typically had to bump that up to 10% and trail it down 1% each year. We did not have to do that with your population. So that obviously had a tremendous impact on your liability.
Are there other policy decisions that could be made that would help manage that liability or cause it to decline over time other than medical rates and things? Are there policy decisions Blount County could make to help that? And if so, what would they be?
There are. Now we're talking about insurance benefits, and what we have seen on the private side in particular is benefits. It's wellness campaigns, it's concerted efforts to improve the health of your people and educate them. It's looking at prescription plans. We've seen the prescription drug plans typically are extremely convoluted and have a lot of hidden costs. Those have been looked at by some of our clients with success.
I think other than that, of course, would be to modify the plan in some manner. And that would be obviously a policy decision. I think with modification, if you were to consider that, it would be important to look at any communications that have occurred, all the plan documents, just to make sure, as you know, that's a challenge. It can be challenging, I think, to make modifications in a lot of ways, so that's something that would need, I just suggest to look at it thoroughly before decisions are made. So.
When was the last review done?
Of the valuation?
Yes, prior to this.
Before this one, it was 2 years ago.
So in 2 years, we've gained or improved $4 million worth.
The liability has been reduced $4.5 million in 2 years.
And most of that is because of things we've done internally?
Yeah,
When we did the valuation 2 years ago, we had an expectation of certain gains, and those gains are liability gains. Those gains were pretty cautious, conservative. Your growth was far less than anticipated across our other clients. So it's a combination of things, being more cautious 2 years ago in terms of liabilities, because there was an anticipation medical care costs are going to escalate quite rapidly, and then with that, of course, a better experience here with your plan. So it's a combination of things. You got a kind of a double hit there, a double gain.
And it could be, one of the factors, one of many, could be people are working longer, which impacts that liability, I assume.
Working longer, of course, defers the point in time where they begin. Exactly. And people are, as you know, they are working longer. Yeah.
So when we put wellness programs in place, how does it affect those numbers? Or, I mean, obviously those that have those kinds of programs perform better than those that don't. Are there other kinds of programs that we can initiate, implement that would help this figure over the next 2 years?
I break that into two components. one, wellness could help, and it's only one factor, a lot of other factors, but just a little degree could influence people to work a little bit longer, better health. I'm able to. I think the second thing, trends for people after retirement are determined to some degree by trends while people are in active employment. So there is an indirect impact in terms of the assumptions that are made for people after they retire in terms of trends and costs. And we look at national trends and we look at local trends. And then we look at your specific trends for the purposes of coming up with these numbers. But I think, candidly, you can do all of those things and should do all of those things, but ultimately the cost of a post-retirement benefit program is going to be determined by your population and what they do and don't do. So, and there's probably a limited number of things you can do to impact the decision-making process for people who have already left your employment.
Well, one of the things some employers do, they would cap maybe future employees from having this benefit. That's one of the ways you minimize the growth in the future. Wouldn't impact current employees, but employees hired at some point in the future, pick a date. That's the way some employers manage it.
Is there any other questions? Matt, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 2A is a Blount County EMA security grant. Kathy, would you like to explain that grant?
I'd be happy to. What this is a sustainment of an existing program that we have. It's a citizens alert system where you call in to this company, give your phone numbers, whatever you want, however you want to be notified, whether it's email, phone numbers, whatever. And if we have an emergency in this county, then you will be notified. And this is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I need to use this grant to sustain that program for another year, because we've already paid for the program with another grant.
Okay, that's the Everbridge program?
That's the Everbridge program. Mm-hmm.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
That's second.
Okay, any discussion?
Is this part of the program we just implemented?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm. This is for next year.
okay. So
These
this
sustainment.
is pay for that same grant
This
or
is
same program?
sustainment for that same program.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a recurring grant?
No, it can be. I just have to request it every year. It's another Homeland Security grant that I have gotten for the last 12 years, so. But they're never guaranteed from year to year.
It will cover everything from line phones to cell phones to computers and the notifications.
It does.
What you have to do, and you've received the information in your packets through the internet and through your mailboxes. You have to contact this company, which is out west, by a website, and put your information in it that you want to do, how you want to be contacted.
Okay.
And then it can be changed. If you decide you don't want a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning, at your house, your cell phone, anything else you put in there, then you can change this and say, I don't think I want all those phone calls. Or if you don't care if there's a thunderstorm coming, but you would like to know there's a tornado coming, then you can change that portion too.
Okay, thank you.
But it's up to the citizens. We have nothing to do with it. All we do is try to provide it for their protection, and then the citizens have to take care of themselves.
If you sign up for everything, your phone never stops buzzing, I'll just tell you.
And it does not go in, it doesn't go into voicemail. They call you until you answer.
Yeah. All righty. Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? I'll ask for roll call vote.
Kirby?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Mitchell?
Yes.
Moon?
Yes.
Samples? Motion passed.
Thank you, Kathy. Item B, Public Library, Library Services and Technology Act, $11,200. Kathy, do you want to address this?
Every year, the U.S. Congress funds the Library Services and Technology Grant, which provides money to the states of the Union, who then make money available to public libraries. And in the state of Tennessee, this is in the form of a matching grant. And so we are asking from the state, out of this program, $5,600, and we're also asking our Friends Group to match that with another $5,600. And with this money, we would purchase 15 PCs to replace outdated ones on our counters, our public counters, in the children's department and the reference department, as well as to purchase some bridges to connect our hand scanners to the new equipment, and a new camera scanner in order to accommodate our patrons who are coming to us with smartphones that have their library cards loaded on the smartphones, and our scanners will not scan that. So these, in most cases, this is replacement equipment. The one thing different about this grant is that we must submit our invoices to the state to prove that we have purchased these items, and then we will be reimbursed. So that is a different arrangement than what we've experienced in the past.
Do I have a motion and a second? Any other discussion?
No, the Friends will meet later in this month, and I must have this application into the state by the end of the month, so everything is, sort of snowballing. The state actually moved up the deadline to apply for this grant by a couple of months, trying to change their sequence, calendar sequence too, so it's pressing us a little bit.
And if for some reason the Friends would not commit to that, then what happens?
Then we would not apply for the grant.
Okay,
We
so
could not.
you'll know before you apply for the grant?
Yes, they will be meeting about the 26th of July, and then I have to have my application in by the 31st.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other
Okay.
questions? Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Kathy. I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Kirby? Lewis? Mitchell?
Yes.
Moon?
Yes.
Samples? Motion passed.
Item C, Drug Court Program, $70,000. Amy, would you like to come up and explain that, please?
This is actually the grant that we get every year from the state. I guess I was confused or behind. I'm not really sure actually why I'm here. The only addition is we did get the extra $20,000 that we asked for. So instead of this being a $50,000 grant that we get from the state, we're getting the $70,000 because they gave us the additional $20,000 that when we originally brought our budget to you, and we said that we were going to be short $27,000 this next fiscal year, but we had approached the state and asked for an additional $20,000. They awarded us the extra $20,000. So that's the only difference really with this grant, is it's for $70,000 as opposed to $50,000. The deadline on this grant was June the 30th. I talked to the state office individuals today. They have said that they're good with extending it, that the grant is still ours, that it's still there. Their only request was, if it passed the committee tonight, if we could get it to them as soon as possible with signature. So.
And no matching funds?
Now, this is the same grant that we've gotten from drug court since the entirety of drug court being in existence. It's not a new grant. It's just we got the additional $20,000 we requested. Yeah.
Kathy's one of those that they get operating grants. And most of what we were trying to do is get all the grants in the same system so that at least we can account for them properly for your all's benefit, and too, that you're all aware of what's going on. So we asked her to bring this back rather than have two grant applications, wait and do it this one.
Do we have the grant? Are we ready to sign on the grant?
It is in your office. I've talked
Okay.
to Amy about it, and they did say that if it was approved, if it was signed we could go ahead and mail it. They did request if there was any way we could scan it and email it to them as soon as, so they have an email copy of it to know that it's been signed, but they would still have to have the mailed original as well. But, and I also have another copy of it on my computer if Amy doesn't have it. But.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you, Amy. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Okay. Any more discussion? I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Kirby? Lewis? Mitchell?
Yes.
Moon?
Yes.
Sample? Motion passed.
Item 3, letters of credit, RFP, debt refinancing. Randy?
Yeah, you've got just a little synopsis of the RFP responses that we received. Blount County ought to be very proud that we had 12 well-established financial institutions that expressed an interest in our RFP. Don't have any results to give you tonight because they did what we asked them to do, which is not only bid on the letter of credit, assuming we wanted to maintain exactly what we have now, but we also asked them in the RFP if they had any creative ideas on how to address our debt situation. So we got a lot of responses in that regard. As you're aware, we have the E1A and the E5A bonds that are included in this, and some of the responses pertain to one issue. Others responded to the second issue, and then some responded to both issues. I can tell you that we will expect, if we maintain what we have now with current structure, debt structure, and same mechanism of remarketing and the liquidity facility, which is the letter of credit, we will be paying less money. So the RFP process was worth it. What I want to do is make sure that PFM has time to examine the feasibility of any opportunity we may have to refinance any of our debt on these two issues. So Blount County needs to be proud that we had all the big boys playing on this one.
Has anybody got any questions for Randy? Thank you, Randy. Good job. Finance reports for information only. Anybody have any comments on that? Any of those finance reports? Seeing none. I'll ask for any input on items not on the agenda. Input items not on the agenda. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So be it.